The following thoughts on Hoppe Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you. Voted as best local podcast in Tampa Bay by the Creative Loafing. You're listening to Hoppe Hour.
What is happening? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe. And on the phone line from the BJ and Migs Show on 99.9 KISW in Seattle, Steve Migs is on the phone line. What's up, bro?
Hey. What's up, Hoppy? How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Now, I've known you for about 2 years now, but it was weird. I met you at the morning show boot camp back in 2013. But what was weird was you were in the waiting room at the nice Renaissance Hotel, and I believe I walked right past you and Toppy, and I just went right to BJ, and we didn't even talk at that boot camp, and that was half because I was in the zone and I was nervous. Then I'm like, why didn't I talk to STP? Do you remember that?
I remember seeing you around at that, and it was like you were just the talk because you're a big dude, so in height. So, of course, you don't fly under the radar for that alone. And then, you beeline straight to BJ, and you were like on his lap practically for the entire weekend, which I understand, man. BJ's a legend, and I had a lot of respect for you because I saw you. You had your eyes set on every big name personality that were there, and you wanted them to know that you were there. You wanted to pick their brain, and I don't blame you one bit. I had a lot of respect for you and what you were doing because, not a lot of young guys have the balls to do that. And also not a lot of young guys really are willing to go to a boot camp, go to these radio seminars and do all these things that, a lot of us have done to pay our dues to try and get our foot in the door. Not many people are doing that these days. So to see someone like you full of all that energy, I thought it was awesome. And I'm glad that we finally did connect, but I had a lot of respect for you for your energy and just your balls and being able to talk to all those guys.
And then the next year, I ended up being able to drink because I was 21 then. And I remember that first night. It's everybody from the show. And they're like, do you guys want to come up to our VIP room? I'm like, yeah, I'm down. So I come up. It's shot after shot. And, dude, I got so drunk.
I got the VIP room, which pissed everybody off. I just asked. I was like, hey, you got any nicer rooms? And I was just joking. And the lady's like, actually, we do have this one and blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, I got like this sick couch, an amazing view, a nice bed. Everything was like, fuck it, let's have this be the place where we have the parties. And then you came up and we're doing plenty of drinking with us. And, we had a good time.
So then the best part is Nelson, who is heard in Lincoln, Nebraska. He does a morning show there for people that don't know on Froggy 98. Yeah. He then says, fuck, I'm hungry. Let's get some White Castles. So we order about 50 to 100 White Castles. And I remember, this is the best part. I don't think you were here for this. So we all go in the main lobby, right? And we're all pretty much drunk. I mean, we're not blackout drunk, but we're smashed. And we go into the lobby and we're outside and you guys go to get a cab. And you guys didn't really ditch me, but I was lost. So I go up to a cab and I'm like, do you know where Migs and the Reverend is? And the guy's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, first off, we did purposely ditch you. No, I'm kidding. Do you remember also when we made the trek to White Castle, we took a cab to White Castle.
Yeah.
And I remember that the cab driver was getting all salty with us because I'm like, hey, man, he was just going to try and drop us off and leave us there. I'm like, bro, we just want fucking White Castle burgers. Can't we just go through the drive-thru? And it was like this big to-do with this cab driver. And I realized, he didn't want to make the trek all the way back to the hotel. But we refused to get out of his cab. So he finally just reluctantly, he was like, fine. Goes through. Our eyes are way bigger than, we thought we could fit way more burgers in us than we actually needed. But you're right. We drove back with probably about 100 of those sliders from White Castle. And maybe 15 to 20 of them. I think I woke up the next day and it was my room just reeked of White Castle.
And then the best part was I'm just eating them left and right. And everyone's like, Hoppy, slow down. The next morning comes, dude, I had the worst food over of all time. I remember I'm on like 2 hours of sleep because we didn't go to bed till like 3, and us interns had to get up at like 7. And I remember Don Anthony, who runs the boot camp, was like, what the hell did you do last night?
White Castle, that's what we did.
And then
also that night I was yelling at you because you kept putting your fucking feet on my bed.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it is about me, but I'm like, I have this weird like thing wherever I am, I treat it like it's my home, whether it be at work, whether it be at a hotel, if I have a rental car, I treat everything like as if it's my property. Like I just have this, I think it's just the way I was brought up. So I believe when I'm in a hotel room, I put all my clothes in the drawers. I hang up I'm like a weird OCD with that kind of shit. So I've got everything all set up, and then we're all hanging out, and everyone's having a good time. And Hoppy's like practically like molesting my bed, like he's covering the like. And for those that don't know, Hoppy, what are you like 6'5", 6'6"?
Dude, you're off. I'm 6'8", man.
6'8". Okay, so you're a big dude. So he's sprawled out over my entire bed. Like I'm like riding like the corner of the bed, and I'm like, this is my fucking bed. Hoppy, get off my bed, sit on the couch. And then he's like, oh, yeah. And then he just puts his feet up with his dirty-ass shoes on my mattress. And I'm like, you motherfucker, if you don't get your feet off of my bed, I'm kicking you out. And everyone in there is like torn because they're like, we understand why you're upset, but I don't know if you really need to be that upset. He's just a young kid. Relax. I'm like, no, he needs to learn some respect. Like,
and then
get your feet off my bed.
And then going back to your whole thing of respect, I don't know if you remember this part, but the last night when everyone's just at the bar drinking and saying goodbye, I wanted to talk to you about something, and it was obviously not important. I mean, come on. So you're on the phone or you're sending a text to your wife, and I'm like, hey, bro. And you're like, give me 1 second. I'm talking to the wife. And I go, okay. So I walk away for like 10 seconds. I get a drink and I go, yo, bro. And you walk away and you're like, Hoppy, I'll talk to you in 5 minutes. Like I wasn't obedient at all.
I know you're about as obedient as my damn Maltese dog. They're bugging the shit out of me right now. No, I mean, dude, that's the best part about those radio conventions is you learn a lot about everybody because we're all fucked up in the head. It's just different types of fucked up. And that's probably why you love it, too, because you're just as fucked up as the rest of us. But for some reason, when we're all in the same room or in the same hotel, even though there's all these big egos and these weird nuances that we all might have, there's like a certain level, like there's a bond that we all have because we all love this industry and we all love what we do that for some reason it's never, I don't even know how to put it in words, but it's like, we all seem to find a way to get along, even though we're all so different, we're all so unique, and we're all so weird. But at the end of the day, we're all wanting each other to succeed because that's why we're there. We're there to learn. We're there to share ideas. We're there to network. We're there to inspire each other. I mean, that's my favorite part about those radio conventions. It's not necessarily the ideas that you get from them, but just being around people who love this industry. It makes you want to do a better job when you get back to whatever market that you're in.
What is some of the best advice that you have learned from the radio conference? Because mine was to be yourself and to make content about your life. I think I learned that from both BJ Shea and Brother Weeze, is to make humble content about your life. So what are some of the things that you've learned over the years?
You know, one of the things I noticed and kind of just put it all together in my own head, but it's to embrace your flaws. It falls right in line with what you're talking about. It's don't be afraid of whatever it is that makes you different. I think for the longest time, I know when I first started in radio, I was told by my then program director, I mean, I used to have a stronger New York accent when I first started doing radio. So I'm from Brooklyn. And he point blank told me, he's like, yeah, you will never be on the air. This is in Seattle. I was just trying to get a weekend overnight gig. I was producing at the time, but I wasn't on the air. So I was just trying to find any way to get on the air. And he's telling me, you're not going to be able to make it in the radio with that voice because of your accent, this, that. You know, you get flustered when you're talking, when you're reading. You can't seem to keep things in order. All this crazy shit that I'm like, you know, and I'm believing him. I'm like, okay, this guy's got to be right. He's my boss. And then over time, I started getting to know some other people in the business, especially morning radio personalities. And when I would talk to them about that, And I remember one guy, he wasn't a morning radio personality, but he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's Marco Collins. He's a well-known and well-loved radio DJ, broke many bands from Sublime to Beck. I mean, he found Beck's music on a 45-inch single, the song Loser, before it ever was even anything. And he thought, this song's a hit. And then, lo and behold, he was right. And he was working at the end when I was working there, too. And I was in an elevator with him at the time. And I told him, I'm like, hey, this is what the boss is telling me. And his response, it was basically like, fuck that, fuck him. That's what makes you different. That's what's going to make you stand out, and why people are going to want to listen to you is because you don't sound like anybody else. And it was like a light bulb went off. And he's like, you know what, you're absolutely right. And then as I started going to these radio conventions, I started seeing and hearing the same kind of a thing. Is that the people who do it the best are the people who are not afraid to show whatever insecurity, whatever flaw is that they have. They just put it out there. And the listeners, I mean, they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for somebody they can relate to. And you can relate to somebody who is just as flawed, who's just as weird, who's just as messed up as you are. Nobody wants to relate to a guy who's got the perfect pipes, who's got the perfect approach to whatever it is that they're saying, but has no personality, has no soul. It's no different than music, in my opinion. You can have the most talented musician out there who can play every lick of every song and can do it perfect, but he can't write a song for shit. He's just talented when it comes to like the technical stuff. But when you got somebody who can write something from their heart or get on a stage, in front of a microphone and speak from the heart and not care about whatever flaw is that's done out there, that to me is the recipe for success. And when I started seeing that amongst other radio personalities, and seeing that the most popular ones, the most successful ones, the ones from like the Brother Weezes to the Howard Sterns to Opie to Bert from the Bert Show, the Kid Craddock. I mean, all types of genres, all types of formats. They're all flawed, but it doesn't matter because they're interesting, and that's why people are endearing themselves to them. And I think that's the best tidbit of advice that I've ever experienced while at one of these radio conventions.
Dude, that's some advice that I've never had before. I've become to realize, and this is from what Weez told me a few months ago, but you need to embrace who you are. Because that's what I was doing, Migs. I was trying to be the perfect host who never had a speech moment, because I used to have a very bad speech impediment, but I've improved it so much, and I'm sort of goofy in social situations, and I always tried to pretend that I don't have it. But what I've done recently is I've embraced it. I've talked about it on the air, and all of a sudden, dude, I feel free. I feel more open to the listeners, and my listens and my downloads are at an all-time high. So that is some of the best advice I've ever had, dude, is to be yourself and not to be some hacky radio disc jockey. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. I mean, the personality is what's going to get you wherever you need to go, because we don't know what radio is going to be like in 20 years from now, but at the end of the day, whatever the audio entertainment is, whether it's podcast, whether it's something that we don't even know yet because it hasn't been invented, it's all going to boil down to, do you have personality? Do you have something that makes somebody want to tune in every day or every afternoon or every night? And the flaws and who you are is what's going to get people to listen. When you're not being yourself, that's people are going to see through that eventually. Maybe not at first, but over time they will. And like you said, I mean, the fact that you feel more free about it, the fact that you can embrace whatever it is that has been like your biggest insecurity, takes the power away from those that could use it against you. I mean, it's silly to relate something to the movie 8 Mile, but when you watch that movie 8 Mile, the most powerful scene with Eminem is the part where he embraces everything that's fucked up about him. How can you beat that? You can't outdo somebody who knows his own personality better than anyone else. So if you're willing to embrace that, put it out there, people are going to, I mean, for the most part, I mean, there are going to be some people that are still going to have whatever issue it is that they have with you, whatever it may be. But for the most part, people are going to see that and see that you're being genuine. And that's something that they can connect to, because whatever it is that they're dealing with in their life, somehow, in some way, in some shape, they can connect it to what you're doing and what you're dealing with. And when you got that going on, man, you've got people who are going to love you for however long it is that you decide to do any kind of audio entertainment.
Now, what are some of the flaws that you think you have that you've brought to the air that have made for some real moments on the show?
The first one that pops in my mind is, I mean, my very minimal English ability when it comes to like pronouncing certain words, partly because of my New York accent, partly because I didn't really pay much attention to English in school. So, I mean, I'll mispronounce certain words, and I know full well that when I'm going into it, if I'm reading a news story, because I do the news on our show, which is crazy to think, but I think that's what adds to the humor of it, is that here's a guy who has a hard enough time reading off of a sheet of paper, and we're making him do the news. And it's like, I'll get through it. It's not like as if it's like unlistenable, but there are certain, as I'm reading, I know for sure I'm not going to be able to pronounce it properly. Now, the old version of me that was trying to sound as perfect as I could be on the radio would just find a different word to say. The version, the me that I am, who I am now, is I see that and I'm pumped because I know what it's going to happen. I'm going to say it wrong, and it's going to lead to some kind of fun comedic moment on our show. So that's the first thing I could think of. I mean, the accent from time to time, the stammering, the slight stuttering over certain words. I grew up in a household where my mom had some very random and weird sayings or weird ways of saying things, and so I'd repeat them on air like as if it's the gospel. It's like that's what are you talking about? No one else says that, and that to me is an element that I think a lot of people can relate to because everyone's got their weird quirks in their family, and I'm just out there putting it out there for however tens to hundreds of thousands, depending on who's listening at that time. I don't even know, but it seems like a lot of people are listening, and they get a kick out of that. And it gives – I don't mind, like I've always said, whether you're laughing with me or at me, as long as you're laughing, I'm okay with it. That's just really what I always, every morning when the mics are turned on, I'm just looking for a reason to get somebody laughing in their car. And if it's at my own expense, so be it. That's a success regardless because, I believe that nobody's off limits. You can goof on everybody as long as you're coming from a place of having fun. The minute I say something that I realize is mean-spirited, whether it be towards a listener or towards a member of our show, I'll be the first to apologize because that's. I mean, I know that some people do that very well. That style of humor. I'm not that person. I like making people laugh. Even if I'm making fun of them, I want them to be laughing as well. If that makes sense.
Wouldn't you say that some radio guys, when they don't know what to talk about, they just end up exploiting people or maybe teasing them too much? Because that's what I like about you guys is, you bust each other's balls. Yeah, they do that here at 102.5 The Bone. But at the end of the day, we all know that we love each other on air. So wouldn't you agree that sometimes it gets to people's heads and then it leads to being the on-air bully?
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. I think it's important, and it sounds like you've got that where you're at right now at the Bone. In that, our philosophy with our show is, look, when the mics are on, everybody's a target. We're going to goof on each other. It's not going to be anything that's going to be mean-spirited, but we're going to goof on each other. But when the microphones are off, everybody's treated with the same exact amount of respect. I don't care if you're a part-timer working 2 days a week on our show, or if you're BJ Shea. Everybody's treated with the same amount of respect because in order to be able to do this radio thing, you got to know that the people you're working with respect you and that you can come to work every day knowing that, I might be the whipping boy on the show, but when the mics are off, I'm being treated with the utmost respect and my opinions matter. My opinions are being heard. When you get to the point where, like you said, there are some people that it's not shtick, it's not having fun, it's just someone who's being just an awful human being that's just treating the people he works with like shit. That can only last for so long. A lot of those shows, you notice they have a high turnover of show members. I mean, we're the type of show. I mean, some of our guys on our show have been with us for over 15 years, and there's a reason. It's because they're treated well. On the air they might be goofed on, but like I said, they know what we do is, of course we're being ourselves and we're making fun of each other based on real stuff. But at the end of the day, we care about each other and we want to see everybody do well. And at no point do we want people to be miserable coming into work every day, because that's what radio's fun, man. I mean, I always tell everybody, I'm like, you'll never hear me complain about my job. The only thing I'll complain about is waking up at 2:15 in the morning. But as soon as I'm awake, there's nothing bad about what I do. Yeah, it's stressful. Yeah, the idea of, being at the mercy of listeners rating you with, the ratings process. And no matter how hard you work, if they're not feeling it, you could possibly lose your gig. That's scary and that's stressful, but it's not hard work. It's a passion, and it's something that we all love to do. It should be fun. And I think some shows lose sight of that, and those are the shows that sometimes get a little, like how you described it, they tend to run out of maybe doing fun, creative content and just go down the road of treating an employee or a member of the show like complete and utter crap because they don't know what else to do.
Dude, how much prep are you doing if you're getting up at 2:15 in the morning? I mean, how hard is that each and every morning, dude? That's some respect right there.
Dude, everyone always says, "Oh, it gets easier, doesn't it?" I'm like, "Fuck no, it gets harder. I'm older now, and it's not that easy." Like, I'll have one beer maybe at night, and I'll feel hungover the next morning. Because
are you serious?
Like, yeah, it's the older you get, man. When I was 23, first working in radio, I used to be in bands, and I mean, I still kind of tinker around with music from time to time, but I'd be out playing shows sometimes till 2 in the morning. I'd have a post party with some buddies at their place. And sometimes I would just walk to work still up from the night before, be able to grind it out, go home, take a nap, and no big deal. That was, when I was 25, 26. Now I just turned 41. If I'm not in bed by like 8:30, man, I'm hurting the next day. But, you have to make those adjustments. And, but yeah, getting up that early is not fun. I like doing it because I live about 40 minutes away from Seattle. I live in Puyallup, which is a smaller town south of Seattle. I like living away from the city now, just kind of a little bit more quiet. I'm a little bit more of a homebody these days. And so it takes about 40 minutes to get into work. By the time I'm at work, it's about 3:45 in the morning. And I need a good 30 to 40 minutes of me just sitting at the desk, honestly not doing shit for the show, listening to music, reading, I guess I'm doing stuff for the show because I'm going through like the internet, reading stories, but it's all fun based. I'm trying to get my mind moving in a positive way. And then at some point, as silly as it sounds, I stop everything. I do a bunch of push-ups just to kind of get my brain moving a little bit more and get the heart racing a little bit. And then I start actually prepping the show at about 4:30, 4:45, and then right about 5 minutes to 6, everything's all set and ready to go.
Now, this is some advice that I want. What is the key to when you don't get a lot of sleep at night, but you have to be ready to go on the air? Like right now, I just sit in on the Mike Kelta show every Monday. But back when I worked with Rover, I had to go to bed by 9 to get the perfect 7 hours of sleep. And if I got 5, I wasn't as good as if I had 7 hours. I know everybody's a different person, but should I meditate? What is the way to get in the zone when it comes to working in radio and having a weird sleep schedule?
I think you unfortunately, you said it best by saying everybody's a little bit different. For me, it's one of my biggest frustrations. I'm at my funniest and at my best when I'm dealing with the least amount of sleep. Like if I had a late night the night before and I maybe got 3 hours of sleep, and I come in, I'm on point. As far as the things I say, I think I just don't have a filter, and I'm not thinking things through, so I'm not overthinking the things I say. So, I'm throwing probably a few clunkers. I'm probably throwing a lot of clunkers out there, but I'm also throwing out some pretty memorable moments in that state, which sucks because I don't want to have a life where I'm always tired in order to be able to perform at a certain level. So I'm just trying to find that happy medium, when I get about 5 to 6 hours of sleep. That seems to be the perfect amount for me. I come home, I get about an hour nap in, and then I'm good to go until it's bedtime. Fortunately, my wife works early. She gets up at 4 a.m., so our sleep schedule is pretty similar. We go to bed at the same time. I know some shows, some guys, they actually have to sleep in a different room because the lifestyle is completely different as far as sleep schedule, and that's just nuts. It's just a lot of trial and error, man. It could be meditation for you. It could be just I do a thing where once a month I go into and it's going to sound crazy, but I go into an isolation tank and I float. And that has changed the way I am not only on the air, but off the air as well, because it's like once a month I get this ultimate mental and physical reset. And it's hard to put into words. And I try to explain it to other radio people. Most of them think I'm insane when I explain it to them. I know Joe Rogan's big into it. It's you go into this tank of water. It's got 800 pounds of Epsom salt in it. So the salt is forcing your body to lift onto the water. So you're just floating onto the water. It's impossible to sink. And what it feels like, because the water is the same temperature as your body, you don't feel like you're in water. You feel like you're floating in space. It sounds crazy, but trust me, it's a pretty amazing feeling. And sometimes I sleep in it. Sometimes I just sit there and I think and I come up with ideas, or I just sometimes just sit there in absolute silence and I meditate and I don't have a single thought go through my mind. It just depends on the experience, where I'm at that day and what's going on. But that to me has helped out drastically. I think other shows or other personalities that they try to do, like, Steve's a fucking moron. This is the dumbest thing. Well, I could just take a bath and it's the same effect. But, you know, there's other people out there, like one guy like Kevin from Kevin, Virginia, Jason in Florida. He's big into doing things differently, and him and I have talked about those kind of things, you know, whether it be different vitamins for your brain. I mean, I'm all about trying to find different ways. You always have to evolve, you know. I mean, 5 years ago, I would have thought I was insane for sitting in a tank for an hour once a month as a reset. But nowadays, I can't even imagine not doing it. I swear by it. But for you, I mean, you know, luckily you're still young, and you still got a lot of years ahead of you. It's just don't be I guess, you know, don't dismiss any idea. Like, try everything, because something might stick for you, whether it be meditation, whether it be, you know, maybe working out before your shift, or there's lots of different, maybe it's, you know, listening to certain shows that get you in the right state of mind, listening to a certain type of music to get you in the right state of mind. I think this is a weird job because we're constantly trying to exercise our brain, because that's the most important part of what we do, is to be able to think clearly and perform at the best of our abilities. And for everybody, it's completely different.
Dude, isn't it weird how radio is very easy? We're not working in a coal mine. We're not working at a factory. But the weird part about it is it's hard because you have to talk. I mean, it's easy when there's things to talk about. But I keep thinking, if I want to ever have a show, Migs, I'm going to have to figure out a way to fill up 5 hours of prep, because I'm looking at the Huffington Post, and that site's becoming trash, and there's no news on there. I look at Talk Topics, and that site's on break for 2 weeks. So what I'm getting at is, isn't it weird how radio can be a pain in the ass? Like, us radio guys know what we're talking about, but to everybody else, they're like, oh, shut up. You just turn on the mic and have fun. Like, isn't it weird how this can play mind games on you, where you begin to freak out over basically nothing?
Sure. Yeah, it's always funny. I talk to so many people who are like, yeah, when I retire, I think I might do something like you do, you know, just I think it'd be fun. I'm like, you don't get it, man. Like, it's not that easy. Like, I wish it was. I mean, if it was that easy, so many people would be doing it. And I'm not saying we're better or worse than anybody. It's not about that. We were willing to deal with the grind that is, you know, paying your dues, working for practically nothing. I mean, making no money. I mean, I always get a kick out of having, sometimes we'll have interns, and they're like, or part-timers, and they just expect to hit the payday right away. And I'm like, buddy, before I worked with BJ, I was on another morning show, and I was one of the main voices on that show. And I was working as an apartment manager just so I could pay my rent, you know, so I could live for free, so I could get by, because I was barely making a dime in this business because I was new, and they took advantage of that. But, you know, in my eyes, I'm like, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. I'll keep busting my ass. I'll get as valuable as I can to whatever company I'm working for, to the point where they can't lose me, and then the power's in my hands. And that's kind of what happened over the course of time. But yeah, I think the more you do it, the more you find ways to be able to occupy that airtime. I think, you know, at first it is a pretty daunting thing to think, how am I going to fill 4 hours, 5 hours of content? But like the Brother Weezes of the world, the BJ Shays, and other guys that you could work, Mike Calta, another great example of that. These guys know what they're doing because they've done it for as long as they had. That's when time, experience has really worked to their advantage. And they also are smart enough to know, I need to live life. Because you can't keep, I mean, as much as you want to like get on the internet and read all the news stories, that's great, because we should know that shit because it's important. But never discount the importance of going out and doing things, man. I sometimes have to battle that with my wife because we're both homebodies, and there are times where I'm like, I got to go out and do this. And, you know, I know she's like, well, are you going to be mad at me if I don't go with you? I'm like, no, not at all. I get it. Like, we're both, that's your comfort zone. But for what I'm doing as a job and for a living, sometimes I got to go out and spend the extra few hours, even though it's going to exhaust me. Like, recently I went to the military base, and it wasn't hard work because it was like I'm going there to hang out with soldiers that are dealing with PTSD, and it's like an honor that they view me as being a way for them to cheer up. But, you know, it's like I already did my shift. It's already towards the end of the week. I'm exhausted, and I spent like 6-7 hours there on the base, and it was the best experience of my life. And, you know, my first instinct was I can't do it. It's too late of a commitment. But I had to tell myself, you know what, this is a great life experience. A, it's cool that they even look at me on the level of where I can bring them great joy. And then on my end, selfishly, this is great content. These are stories that we can share on the air. I mean, the fact that I can go on the air and say, I finally got to shoot a gun for the first time in my life. And like, oh, what'd you shoot? And I'm like, a machine gun. Like, a fucking machine gun is the first gun I ever shot in my life. Like, that's a fun way to get into a topic or a story. You know, I mean, I can't get that from reading the internet. You know what I mean? It's just about living life. It's doing things. It's creating a staff of people. BJ's great at this. I learned a lot from him. Is that he's hired on all these people for our show that work behind the scenes so that he doesn't have to do it, and I don't have to do it, because he wants both him and I and other guys on the show too, like the Rev and Toppy, for us to get out there and live our life, because that's the content that, you know, the other great shows in town, whether it's Danny Bonaducci, whether it's Jubal, Brook and Jubal, or Kenton Allen, or whoever it is, those guys don't have that content, because that's not, you know, they can't get that anywhere. That's us living our life, sharing it with our audience, and they probably do the same with theirs. But I only know my show, and I think that's when you start getting into a great rhythm of doing a great show. Is that you look at these not as, I don't know, you look at things being thrown at you as opportunities for great on-air content. You know, I don't like tonight. I don't really feel like going to my company Christmas party. I don't feel like driving back into Seattle, getting dressed up. But I'm like, something might fucking happen, and that'll be a great story on the air.
Yeah, man. I mean, to me, you have to live life, because this is just radio, dude. I mean, we get so wrapped up into it. But at the end of the day, we're not celebrities unless we're at some event. So we get so wrapped up into this, dude, getting this ego, thinking we're so important. But if we leave the town that we're heard in, nobody gives two shits about us. That's what I'm coming to realize about radio. Is I was getting recognized everywhere in Cleveland. If it was Target, if it was the library or the DMV. But once I moved here to Tampa, it took 6 months, and now I'm getting recognized. But to me, you kind of have to live a life where you're not Migs on the air, or you're not Hoppe on the air, and you just need to be yourself, because that's when the true humble part comes out. You know,
one of the things I learn a lot in life based off of what others have done that I don't necessarily agree with, and I apply it to myself. And I mean, I've worked with some people in the past, and this is BJ. I'm not trying to like hide around and be like, oh, I'm actually talking about BJ. I'm not, because BJ is a great example of a guy who doesn't have an ego. I mean, we all have egos, but doesn't have an ego in the sense that he's defined by his job. And that's something I think for anyone, and I think for you, for anyone who's relatively new in the radio business, is do not ever let radio define who you are as a human being. It's so easy to do it because, yeah, you're right. We're on the air. You know, people know who I am. I can go to places, and it's like people get excited to see me. It's pretty cool because I'm kind of an introvert, so that helps break the ice. But I never get too caught up in it, because one day, and I've seen this happen to other radio people, this job will eventually, either I'm going to retire, or I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to quit and go to another market, or I don't know. You know, I mean, you don't know what the future holds. I like to think that Seattle is my home. I mean, that's where my wife is from. I love my friendships and my family that I have here now. It's like I can't imagine not being here. And I'm at that point where it's like if radio ended, I would miss it, obviously, but I think I would like podcast or do something to still get that audio entertainment fix. But I wouldn't be devastated in the sense that I've seen radio guys lose their job and they've lost their identity. They've lost who they are as a human being, and that's sad. because no job should be that. I mean, we have fun jobs, and yeah, it's cool that people consider us celebrities or we're public figures. That's awesome. But when the job is gone, those people are gone too. It's about surrounding yourself with people. Like, I mean, most of my closest friends could give two shits about what I do for a living. I'm just one of the fellas. I'm part of the crew. In fact, I'm without a doubt, I'm, one of the more quiet ones of the group. I just sit back and enjoy the ride. Like, they're all very fun and entertaining people who have actually become characters on our show just because they have great stories, and I'll share them on the air. And it's always funny when I'm at events with some of my buddies, and a listener will go up to one of them and be like, "Hey, you're Munson or you're J-Mac. Like, I hear Steve talk about you all the time." And I'm like, that's hilarious. Like, they've resonated just because of their stories. It's connected with our audience. But I make it a point to be around people that are not – I'm not saying that I don't want to be around people that, like, shit on my job. Like, I like knowing that people respect what I do and think it's cool. But I'm not around people who are, like, enamored with what I do for a living, because it's not healthy. It's and when I meet people and they get really worked up about meeting me, I'm like, I do everything in my power to be like, dude, I'm not really that exciting. Like, I appreciate it, but let's just have a beer, like, and I'll go buy them a drink or something like that. And then usually within, like, the first couple of minutes of them being excited, they start to realize, oh, you're just no different than one of my friends. And then I think that's awesome, because then they view me on a level that's not like, oh, this public persona. It's like, oh, Steve, he's one of, I think the greatest compliment any radio guy can get is from a listener that feels like you're a part of their friendship or part of their family, or they feel like they're a fly on the wall that is your life. And if I could do anything to foster that in any opportunity, I will, because those are the people that you want to stay. They'll be with you through thick and thin. They'll buy what you're selling, quote unquote. If that makes sense. Like, if you're putting yourself out there, they're going to support it. And I think that's important. I think too many radio guys get really worked up about being a quote unquote star, and man, those are the ones that go down a really dark road when the job leaves them, because it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It sucks. I always joke about it, saying that one day I'm going to have to get an adult job, and I hope I don't. But, if that happens, you got to think, okay, can I get by not being a public person? Can I get by not being somebody that people recognize and they want to give you free crap all the time? And if you can, I think that your head's in the right place then. I think that's important for people to have that mentality, because, yeah, it's good to have an ego. I think ego drives a lot of people to be successful, but you got to know when to pull that ego back from time to time. And treat others with some sense of, respect. I mean, that would be nice. I see some of these radio guys thinking the world should just be handed to them. Everything should be free. I'm not that guy. And I think it's because I surround myself with people and friends that aren't like that either. And they're not pumping my tires. And I think it's important. I've been around other radio people who I meet their friends, and I realize all their friends are people who give them shit for free. Here's John. John also does hardwood floors. Or here's Rick. Rick does electrical work. And I'm like, wow, this guy, all of your friends basically remodeled your home. They're not friends. You're just using them, and they're using you. And it's like, at some point, that's going to come crashing,
Would you say that it's ever gotten to your head, or have you basically always been humble and appreciated everything you've had?
I think I've always appreciated everything I have, just because I've had to work really hard to get it. And I've been told by many people all the way back from family up until people in the industry, that I would not succeed. So I've had that chip on my shoulder, and I still kind of do, only because I think it's just always going to be there in a sense. Maybe it's an insecurity. Maybe it's just some kind of weird thing. So I don't think I'll ever not appreciate what I have, because I worked really hard to get it. Have I had moments where I think my ego got the better of me? Absolutely. Nowadays, I would say I'm pretty sure that nobody would view me as coming off arrogant or as a jerk to them at any certain point. If I did, it was, I can't think of it. But, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there's a couple instances I'm sure that I was not as good of a person as I should have been, because I let the ego get the better of me, usually when alcohol was involved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think nowadays No, even when I'm drunk, I just want to have fun and do stupid shit and make people laugh and maybe get some way too many White Castle burgers that I won't eat. But you know what I mean? Like, I think we all have those moments. I think when you have those moments and you can recognize you were an idiot, and it's like a relationship. I mean, I don't know how many times in a relationship I've been a complete moron, and my hope is that I won't make that same mistake twice. And I apply that to personal, professional, whatever it may be. I tell the people on our show, I'm like, I expect you to fuck up, make mistakes, but if you keep making the same mistakes, then we have a problem. And it's no different than, I'm sure my ego's gotten the better of me a couple of times. And all I can do is not have it happen again. And I'm pretty certain that it hasn't in God knows how long.
Dude, isn't it weird that when you're on the air, like when I'm on the Mike Calta show, I just see it as 7 people talking in a room, and I'm sure you see it that way too. Isn't it weird how the whole town is potentially listening, and what we say can potentially make their morning? Like, I'll have someone come up to me and say, I loved when you said this, or I love Hoppe Hour. Like, isn't it so much of an honor that what we say actually means something to people?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That never, every time I get a complimentary message, I've experienced it a lot with the morning show, and also, I do a podcast called the Migs Cast, and it's about, we kind of just, the beauty of a podcast is that you don't necessarily have to be too concerned about, is this a tune out, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
people who are going to the podcast are going there because they really care. They really want to listen, and they're willing to accept a couple of, slow moving pieces from time to time. But I started noticing as I started doing the podcast, I really kind of focused on it being a podcast about, we all deal with crap, but let's find ways to handle it in a positive way. And over the course of the years, man, I'm getting messages from people, and it's been, 5 or 6 years I've been doing it, from people who have battled depression and use my podcast as a way to keep their head above water. People who were potentially at the end of their rope, if you know what I mean, saying that my podcast has helped them. And it's heavy, man. It's the greatest feeling to know that I'm helping people, but it's full disclosure, we've talked about my podcast, but about 5 months ago, one of our bigger listeners of my podcast, he reached out to us. I didn't see it until the next week because I don't always check all the voicemails and the emails until the day that we do the podcast. And he took his life. And and I found out because his mom called our podcast line because she saw that it was the last number that he called before he went off the grid. And I called her back to see how, I'm like, oh, hey, this is that podcast. And she's like, I can't talk to you. They just found his body. And, man, that really hit me in a way where I was on the fence if I even wanted to do the podcast. I was on the fence if I needed some time off from work. I take it really hard, because I do care. I'm all about telling poop jokes as much as the next guy, but I really do give a shit about the people who listen, especially those that reach out. And so when that happened, man, it devastated me. And I shared it on the podcast, and it was soon after that a family was dealing with their kid is battling cancer, still is. Hopefully one day there'll be great news. He's 8 years old. And a friend of a friend was like, hey, can you go visit them at the Children's Hospital? It'd be or call them, FaceTime. It wasn't even visit. It was just say, hey, can you just call? I think it would pick up the spirits of the family. They're going through a lot of stuff. They don't even know if he's going to last this month. And this is right after I found out about that. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I don't know if I can handle this. You know what I mean? And I did it not for the show. Like, usually I'll do things, like I said earlier. I do things because I'm like, oh, this would be a great story in the air. I had zero intentions of ever sharing it with anyone other than the family that I was calling. And then I talked to the kid and his family, and I still keep in touch with them. We've become friends, the family, and the kid's name's Shay. He's he makes me want to have kids. He's like that awesome of a kid. And knowing that I was helping them bring them joy was like it reminded me of, okay, you know what? There's going to be times where life's going to get in the way of having a good time. Life's going to get in the way of being this court jester on the radio, and sometimes shit's going to be real. And knowing that a kid took his life who was a big fan of mine, really hurt me. And like my wife even said, do you feel partially to blame? And I'm like, I know I shouldn't, but I kind of do. Like, I feel like I could have helped. And I probably couldn't have. I mean, sometimes, who knows? But then soon after that, then you meet this family, and I realized what I get to do for a living brought some joy. And then I went that night after talking on FaceTime. It was my birthday that day. It was October 3rd. So I was like, I told my wife, I'm like, I know we have plans, but I'd really like to go visit this kid I talked to on FaceTime. So we went down there and hung out with him and his family all night. And then after that, now he's in Spokane, so I can't see him. He's at a hospital there because it's closer to his home. But while he was still here in town, I would go visit him once a week, if not more, go play video games. And it was never done for anything other than, man, it made me feel good to know that because of this silly job of making people laugh, I've made an impact on somebody to where, it's given them strength. And his dad, and that, like I said, I wasn't trying to make it into anything. All of a sudden he shares it on our KSW's Facebook page, what I've been doing, and posts pictures that I've taken with the kid. And, and then that gets spread virally. And then, like my boss is like, well, why haven't you shared this with anyone? I'm like, I didn't do it for any other reason than just to bring joy to this kid and his family. And the fact that he shared that was really cool. I mean, he didn't have to. I wasn't looking for it as a PR move. But man, I mean, him doing that was really nice. And it definitely like struck a nerve with a lot of people who deal with that kind of stuff. And, it showed a human side that you can't force that onto people. I can't force that I have a heart and I give a shit about everybody. But when I have these opportunities, I will take them to help people out. And it's all because of this job. This job brings a lot of joy to people and makes people laugh when they're stuck in traffic and their day sucks. And we can make people smile, and that's fucking awesome. But then there's a next level where it doesn't happen often. It might only happen once in a career. But it totally makes you realize what we're doing is pretty damn special, and not to forget that. I mean, we don't know how many people's lives we're helping. And I know it sounds so silly because it's like we're just telling fart jokes or whatever. But, for somebody, their day sucked, and they were in a bad mood until they heard me maybe mispronounce a word, and the rest of the show made fun of me for that. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, I might be having a shitty day, but I'm not as fucked up as Steve is when it comes to the English language. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that kind of stuff is pretty damn awesome, man. It's I'm not trying to get all heavy with it, but like, this job is a heavy job from time to time, and I love what I get to do, and I love the fact that somebody views me as a form, like no different than what I told you earlier, going to visit soldiers in the Army here at Fort Lewis Joint Base McCord. And bringing them a good, bringing their spirits up. And then, before I left, like giving them my number and saying, hey, you guys, anytime you want to come visit the station, you're not feeling up, you're having a down day and you just can get away from work, come by. And we had like 6 soldiers just come by last week from that base. And, it's like, this shit's easy, man. We're just letting people into our quote unquote home to watch us do radio, which I think would be very boring to be in the room watching us, but it's not for someone who's a fan. I mean, I remember if Howard Stern would have said, hey, you can come in and watch my show, holy shit, that would have been fucking awesome. You know what I mean? Like, so for us, we might be that to them, and here we are saying, hey, come on in. You can watch what we do during commercials and songs. We'll bullshit with you and hopefully bring a smile to your face. And man, it's pretty damn cool that what we do for a living can have a positive impact on people's lives. And it's nice to have those reminders from time to time.
Dude, that was one of the most deepest things you've ever said to me, man. Like, that just changed the way I view everything. So what I want to ask you before I let you go is, where do you want to see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to radio and your life?
I just want to keep evolving. I would like to just see our show, BJ and Migs, continue to grow. We're in a great spot here in Seattle, and I just want to see it continue. There's going to come a point where, BJ's ancient. He's really old. He's, kind of needs a walker these days. He's older than me, though. So there's going to come a point in his life where he's going to want to hang up the microphone before I do. And my hope is that I can just take the ball and run with it and continue to do a great show here in Seattle. I I view like what I'm doing on my podcast as practice for what I one day want my show to be. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I've told all the guys on my podcast, this to me is and I've told my listeners, it's not like as if it's a secret. I'm like, this is practice. You know, if we put on a good show, awesome. But if we hit some clunkers, this is practice. I'm trying to figure things out. And that's what I'm doing, man. And I've seen my podcast grow into this community where, I'm not even kidding you, man, a group of them, like people that never met before are now friends because of my podcast. They've joined this Facebook group that's just the Migs Cast, and I intentionally made it a group and not a like page because I didn't want to be dictating. You know what I mean? I wanted it to be all inclusive, so I don't even have to post shit on there. These guys are just doing it themselves. They all went out, like I think on Saturday night to a bar and played laser tag, and a whole bunch of them went. And I'm like, they're having listener parties without us. Like, they invited us, but I couldn't make it. I had other things going on, but they did it anyway. It was like, we're no longer that important in this community that is the podcast. Like, I think that's awesome, and that's kind of what I see. What I can bring is, I jokingly say I want to build a cult and of followers, but I don't mean it in a sense like I want people to like wear Nikes and take their lives or something stupid, you know what I mean? But I want to build a group of people that like want to look out for each other, want to be a community, want to be there to lift people up when they're having a shitty day, want to be there to goof on each other, want to talk shit to each other because their football teams are playing each other that day. Like, that to me is what radio is. Radio is a community, and it's about, like, you know, I see what we do within our industry as how we network. We've all become a community, you know, you and I, and, you know, all these shows across the country, we're all buddies. Why can't we have that be an extension to our listeners as well? If you can make them be a community with you and feel like they are part of the family, which they should, because they are just as important as we are. We need the listeners just as much as they need us for this entertainment. But if they can feel like they are a big part of what you're doing, man, the sky's the limit. You've got people that are willing to run through a wall for you. And I'm not saying in a negative way. I mean, in a positive way. That's why I joke about it being a cult, but it's like, that's kind of like, you know, that's kind of what I want, is that I want a group of people that are looking out for each other, whether or not they agree philosophically on some things. That's great. Don't agree on things, argue, but that's what family is that at the end of the day, you got each other's back. And I like watching that happen. And I see that happening both on my podcast, both on BJ and Migs. I mean, BJ's, you've talked to him, you know what he's all about. I learned a lot of that from him. That's what made him successful here in Seattle. When he first got out here, he created a community. I mean, it was a small community at first, and it grew. And there are people who, to this day, are still diehard, loyal BJ Shea fans because of what he did, the early groundwork that he laid when he first came out here. And when you got that, when you got a community, man, like I said, the sky's the limit. That's my goal, is to be as big as humanly possible, not to serve my ego, but mainly so I can keep doing this for a living.
Yeah.
In order to get a real job, provide a good life for my wife and my family. Hopefully one day have kids. Be as good of a human being as I can to people. Make an impact on both my friends, my family, and the listeners' lives. I want to know that, I take a lot of pride. Like, I have buddies that I've met throughout the country, and they say, one thing that seems to be the recurring theme is that I have a certain level of energy that just kind of brings up the room when I'm around people. And that's all I want to do, man. I just want to make people feel good. As hippie as that might sound, I'm not a guy that wants to dwell on negativity. I believe that, we just got to keep shit's going to be thrown at us from time to time. And sometimes, we're all going to be bummed, but I'm always trying to find ways to kind of pick myself up or pick the people around me up so that we can keep being the best human beings and the best, radio personalities, the best husbands, whatever it is, man. I see greatness in a lot of people. Probably, and I learned this from BJ. He does the same. And I just want to see it come. I want the rest of the world to see it too, if that makes sense. If I see someone that I think has talent, and Hoppe yourself being one of them, I want to see that guy grow and be, and I think Hoppe, in a few years, man, and it sounds like you're starting to find your voice, you're starting to find your personality, you're starting to be you. Once you start really starting to, they say in anything, 10,000 hours, and it's true. The more time you put into this job, the more seasoned, the more comfortable you get, the more you become, man, you're gonna do great in this industry. You just got to keep doing it and not let anybody tell you otherwise.
Well, dude, that means a lot, man, because I've wanted to do this for 11 years, and my speech used to be awful, and kids used to make fun of me. But once I graduated high school, that's when I had my true meaning, and that's why I never let anything get me down, man. I mean, yeah, there might be people on air that might be douchebags to you, but at the end of the day, you need to realize that if you believe in yourself and you think you can do it and other people listen, that's all that matters. You know what I mean?
Dude, it's a lesson I learned just recently with the name change. It's a valuable lesson, and this is another thing I would share with you, and it'll be real quick, but it's, obviously, like, I have a great mentor in BJ and my boss, Dave Richards. Like, these guys look out for me, but still at the end of the day, you still got to believe in yourself. And for the longest time, before I was called Steve Migs and it was BJ Migs, I was Steve the producer on the air, STP. I originally started as a producer. That was the name I was given by my old host of my old show, and it stuck. It became a brand. I had it for 17 years in this market. And I hated it. I hated it since day one. But I was like, when I was 23, I didn't have the balls to say, I don't like this. Don't call me that. And, can I just go by my name, which is Steve Migs, which is what everyone's called me. It's short for Migliore. But since I was a kid, teachers, family, everyone calls me Migs. That's just my name. I never had the balls to say it. And I think in the back of my head for 15 plus years, I thought, well, one day someone's going to come to bat for me and say that Steve shouldn't be called Steve the producer anymore. And then something clicked in my head, and I'm like, you know what? Nobody knows I don't like this name because I don't tell anybody. Sometimes you have to be your own advocate. You have to speak up on behalf of yourself because people can't advocate for you when they don't know that it's an issue. So finally I said, you know what? Fuck it. I don't like this name. I went into my boss's office, and I'm like, I don't like being called Steve the producer anymore. It's hurting me with my career. There's ad agencies on the national level that won't use me as an endorser because they're like, he's just a producer. He's not an on-air personality. And our salespeople have to go, here's the audio samples of the show. He's the co-host of this show. He just is called Steve the producer. It's a nickname. But they wouldn't put money into me because of that. And other people would view me like major management when they'd come to town. They would look at me like as if I was a major player on the show. And it was finally getting to me because I'm getting older and I'm thinking, hey, long term, one day I want to host a show when BJ is not doing it anymore. It can't be the Steve the producer show. That's not going to work. So I talked to my boss. At first he was like hesitant, and he's like, well, what about if we just make it STP? And I'm like, in about 2 years, I'm going to come back to you and saying I hate that too. So we go through all this. I changed my name on the air. Most people get it. Some people are like, this is stupid. I hate it. You're Steve the producer. You always will be. One guy, and I'll never forget this, tells me point blank, he goes, this is the worst career move you'll ever make. That is your brand, like a listener. And I'm like, God, is this guy right? Like, you start believing it, No shit. 2 days later on the air is when BJ says, hey, I've been thinking a lot about this name thing, and I think it's only fair that you have your name on the show as well, since you are just as much, if not more of a contributor to the show. I mean, I'm, behind the scenes, I'm doing all the, the planning, the preparation, the coming up with the ideas, and then BJ comes in and we flesh them out. And so he's like, I want to put your name on the show. And I'm like, oh, fuck you, man. You don't have to do that. I just want my name not to be Steve the producer. That's all I want. So here it is. I had a goal. All I cared about was that. People telling me it's the worst idea, but I still stuck by it because I believed in myself. It's like staying true to yourself and believing, you know what, don't listen to anybody else. Everyone's going to tell you, or not everyone, but a strong vocal minority are going to tell you that this is a shitty idea and you're an idiot for doing it. Do it if you believe in it. If your gut tells you it's worth it, it's worth it. And I did it. 2 days later, after that text from that listener that's making me second guess myself, now my name's on the show. All right, tell me if that's a bad move for my brand. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden it went from being Steve the producer to having the show be BJ and Migs.
Isn't it weird how these guys are just a bunch of pussies to hide behind a keyboard, and they would never say that to you at the bar? Like, hey, I think your name's lame. Like, these guys are just losers that have no lives, that just hide behind a keyboard.
Yeah, they are, and more often than not, what I've realized, and sometimes I call people on the text line. Like I don't get in arguments. Our company doesn't want us to. It's not worth it, and I get it. Part of me wants, like I always said, if there's ever a day that I'm calling it quits, and I know it's my last day, that's the day that every texter that texts in that day is going to hear my real opinion about what I think that they're saying. You know what I mean? But I'll just get back to them. Like if someone's being a dick, and I'll write them back like, "Hey man, you having a rough morning?" Like. Not sure why you need to get all aggro about it. And sometimes they'll write back. More often than not, I'll be like, bro, you're right. I got into a fight with my wife or blah, blah, blah. And I took it out on you and your text line. Or, sometimes I'll even write them back just point blank. You realize there's a human being on the other end of this text or this Facebook message. Like, you're not just writing a heartless, soulless being. Like, you're being an asshole. And more often than not, I mean, there's been a couple times I've gotten into it. Like, I'll jokingly be like, "Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate the kind words." And like, "No, I really do hate you." Like, all right, like, cool. Like, I don't know what to tell you at that point. I mean, okay. Well, you know what? Like, you should not listen to this show because 50% of this show is me. Like, that's stupid. Like, you're the idiot, not me. So yeah, for the most part, I think some people they just don't realize that their miserable existence is them, and it's not whatever the target is, whether it's us, whether it's another company, whether it's an athlete, a musician. People just want to be pissy. And sadly, though, some of these people, that's the only way they get a response. Like, I make it a habit to rarely respond to negative tweets. Like, if someone's being a dick, I won't respond. I will respond to every single positive tweet because I feel like that's the opposite of what a lot of people are. And I think that's the issue is that celebrities, and I'm not saying we are, but celebrities like, big name athletes, big name whatever, you notice this, and you'll probably see it too. Who do they respond to on Twitter? They respond to the negative fans.
It's weird.
Right. So what does that encourage? More negativity. And I've seen that happen where someone's an asshole, and then you respond back to them like, "I just wanted to get a response." I'm like, that's fucking sad that's the world we live in. And that's as much fault as the celebrities in a sense than anyone else too, because it's like, hey, we're breeding people being assholes because they think that's the only way they're going to get any kind of results.
Yeah, man, that was the best way to say it because at the end of the day, we cannot let what these guys say to us because it's just words, man. We need to be thick-skinned. You know what I mean?
I agree, man. BJ calls it thin skindrome. Out here, and it really is. I think, and I know you talk about fake outrage. On your podcast, and it's only getting worse.
Oh,
I think people
we're offended by everything. A fucking red coffee cup, yippee-ki-yay, dude! Holy shit!
That one cracked me up because then you turn on the TV. And there's a Starbucks commercial with that red cup and all this Christmas imagery, including a little fucking kid with a bib on that says Merry Christmas. And I'm like, wait a minute. Could it quite possibly be that they just decided to save a couple bucks by not printing shit on the cup? Or they thought, you know what, a red cup would. That cracks me up, man. And then we find out that the original outrage was just a troll website or whatever it may be, but it still triggered. I go to church. I'm a Christian person, and I feel like the vocal minority of Christianity is just hurting this world because it's like they want to get upset about everything. And it's like that with any kind of group. You got these overly obsessive people in whatever group it is, and they just take – it's like that with sports too, man. God forbid, even here in Seattle, if I say something that's somewhat negative about a Seahawk player, if I think they're not playing all that well – I'm a hardcore fan. I've been a fan my whole life. I love the Seahawks. Even when I was in New York, I loved the Seahawks. It was just my team because back when I was growing up, Steve Largent was the star player, and I grew up in a non-football house, but I liked football. And I'm like, well, he's a star player, and his name's Steve. I'm going to be a fan of his team. It was a stupid reason, but that's what made me become a Seahawks fan. So it's kind of cool to live in the market where the Seahawks play. But if I'm like, oh, man, that wasn't a very good game, you get people getting, really butthurt. And they're like, you're not a real fan. Fans don't ever have anything negative to say. I'm like, yeah, they do. Fans are fanatics. We're obsessed. We love the team, but we also can point out the bad things.
Dude, dude, everything you've said has reached me in a different way. I haven't had inspirational podcasts like this since Brother Weeds. Like, you need to write a book about radio and life, dude. Like, you could be a public speaker, man. Like, you just pumped me up, man.
Oh, right on, man. I appreciate that. Now, public speaking, I'm a mess, man. I can't do it. I hate public speaking, man. I start cursing. It's the worst.
And now, if they liked everything you've said, man, for the past hour of this podcast gold, where can they hear your show and your podcast?
KISW.com. That's where our show lives off of 99.9 here in Seattle. That's BJ and Migs. We're on Twitter and all the Facebooks. If you just type in, my Twitter handle is just I'm Steve Migs. Snapchat as well. I'm Steve Migs. Everything. Instagram. I try to keep it all straight across the board. My podcast is called the Migs Cast. It's just sometimes it's an hour long, sometimes it's 2 hours. It depends on what's going on in our world. We have bands on. We just had Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top on there.
Nice.
Yeah, dude. We're just trying to have a good time. It originally started as being a wrestling podcast. I think maybe we spend all 20 seconds a show of 2 hours long mentioning wrestling, so it's kind of funny that it evolved into just being a podcast about the guys on the show and music and trying to a lot of this kind of talk, a lot of like trying to keep people positive and keep people inspired. And you can find that on iTunes or on Stitcher. Just type in the Migs Cast. Lots of places, but KISW.com, you can find pretty much anything there that has anything to do with myself or BJ Shea.
Well, dude, this has been so much fun, man, especially the last 2 years, man. You've been such a mentor to me. You've always had my back during rough times and the best times, like right now. So thank you for coming on Hoppe Hour. This was a lot of fun, bro.
My pleasure, Hoppe, and I look forward to seeing what your future holds, man. Keep doing what you do. I know myself and BJ and all the other guys that have met you are all real proud of you, man. Just keep doing it.
Thank you, bro. Keep up the good work, man.
See ya.
All right, see you, man. Migs from the BJ and Migs Show on 99.9 KISW in Seattle. He represents class. There are a lot of guys in radio that are edgy and outspoken, but the thing is they let the ego get to them and they just are unrelatable and they can't poke fun at themselves, but they poke fun at other people. But what I like about BJ and Migs is they're edgy, they make fun of each other, but at the end of the day, they're human beings that care about each other, and they're creative and they're not hacky. So if you want to hear their show, go to 99.9 KISW.com to check out the podcast. And if you're a fan of BJ and Migs in Seattle and you want to hear my show, download the app via the Google Play and the iPhone shop, or go to hoppyradio.com, tweet at me at Ryan Hoppe Radio, or you can email me, Ryan@hoppyradio.com. This has been Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, saying peace out.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.
This is an official broadcast of Hoppe Radio. For more info, check out hoppyradio.com and hoppysworld.com.